Rather than knowing what to fear and expect, which sows fires of confusion, outrage, and victimhood, let's cultivate not knowing, letting our preconceptions and certainties, letting go of our preconceptions and certainties. Please use whatever practice grounds you in this space, be it meditation, mindfulness, ceremony, or prayer. Bear witness to what arises, both outside and inside, and then honor the response that naturally comes forth from this present moment. This is the best of times to practice these three tenets, grounding our perceptions and actions in our experience of the wholeness of life rather than in fear and bias. May we serve this whole with strength, patience, humor, and determination. I had a small hand in creating this. It was primarily Bernie who wrote that. And I just love it. And I think it's just such a beautiful way to present again how important the three tenets are for each moment in our lives. And how, as I said earlier, the practice of bringing the three tenets into politics is so rich with opportunity for us to study the self by seeing how it is we relate to others and the rest of the world. So that was out in 2016. I had started to lobby Congress in 2013 around climate, global warming. And as someone who'd spent his career in Wall Street and wore a suit every day, and basically is a lifelong fiscal conservative, I found myself advocating mostly on the right side of the aisle, which was quite an experience. Those were times when, for global warming, climate change, whatever it was called by different people at that time, it was publicly viewed to be a hoax and not real. And so it was interesting to get behind closed doors and have honest conversations with offices that might not have publicly said had recognized any issues. But behind closed doors, it was so critical to bring the three tenets to bear as we walked in, to really listen to what was being shared and bear witness to the concerns that had to be addressed for those staff members and the member of Congress as well, who were representing their own constituents, who have their own issues that they needed to be addressing. So it was very powerful. I had also just finished watching The House of Cards, which gave it a little bit of an edge, a concern, an anxious edge walking through the halls of Congress. But what I found was the folks in Congress are all there to some degree to serve the country, some degree out of pride and some degree out of power. But it's part of who we are, and as citizens, it's important for us to be engaged. So that was my experience going into 2013. And one of the things that, as I said, that was so critical, not one of the most critical things, was the three tenets. But I also like to share that Bernie's beautiful three tenets were always accompanied by his, not always, but he was frequently accompanied by Bernie's very clear point that everything is just an opinion. We all are built around these ideas that we think are facts, but in the end, they're opinions. And it's the opinions that each of us hold that cause us to suffer and can cause others to suffer when that conflict is created, when the opinions don't match. And if we can recognize that their different opinions are just opinions and that our opinion is just an opinion, we can hold it more loosely, I think. And I think if you reflect back, certainly in my case, it's true. I reflect back on times when I have had very strong opinions about one thing or another. And over the course of maybe years, maybe months, sometimes only days, those opinions would change. And sometimes I'd end up feeling an opposite view. And I think it's important to remember that. Now I want to bring up 4 quick PowerPoint slides to put a little science behind Bernie's opinion. So I'm going to ask Chloe to pop up slide number 1. Thank you. So this is the cover of a book by Jonathan Haidt, The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. It's a quick read. He has good summaries at the end of each chapter. He's got his own cliff notes in there. I think it was a great tool for me and many people to hold our own opinions more loosely. And Haidt's research shows that people are fundamentally intuitive, not rational. His research confirms basically David Hume's point that reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions. So when we contemplate why people who disagree with us will not listen to reason, we need to understand that we use reason to justify our decisions, not as a tool to make decisions. Reasoning is a skill we evolved with to further our social agendas, to justify our actions, and defend the teams we belong to. When we can recognize that, we should therefore not expect individuals to produce good, open-minded, truth-seeking reasoning, particularly when self-interest or reputational concerns are in play. Most people are groupish or tribal. Most people are emotional. They don't want analytical argument. They want an argument that appeals to the heart, and they want to feel part of something. Chloe, can you show number 2? So his book is built around creating or showing through research the moral foundations, the building blocks, as he calls them, that we each hold. And if you see these six, I'm sorry, they show up so differently in different cultures. And if the one that's sanctity and degradation, right? That last one. In some cultures, as you all may know, it's very rude to show the bottom of your feet towards somebody. In some cultures, I know it's interesting in Japan, it's rude to sneeze, but it's perfectly fine to burp. But this is just part of our culture. These are little things, of course, but I think the other thing that's interesting too is fairness and cheating. Those are moral foundations. They're not quite the same when you look at it from sort of a liberal versus a conservative perspective in terms of what's fair. What's fair in a conservative perspective would be if you put in a lot of effort, you get back a reward. And fairness in more of the liberal side is did you have a fair opportunity? And are we treating people from a government perspective equally? So anyway, those are the 6 moral foundations, building blocks. And these foundations, these blocks that help us identify our own tribes. And when we identify our tribes and we have this moral intuition that allows us to relate to others, it both binds us to them and blinds us to the negatives of our view in terms of how we're treating others. Chloe, could I have slide 3, please? And as with any foundation, the more blocks, the stronger the foundation, and the more opportunities to connect with others, i.e. voters. What's interesting to look at here, I think, is to notice, it got jammed over on the far side, but you can see as you go towards very conservative, more of the blocks come up are important rather equally the more conservative you are. In the very liberal, there's quite a divergence between fairness, care, and the others. And it's just interesting to see. It's not a judgment, but I think it's an awareness that we want to have depending on where we might fall in that line, but also where others in our family or the folks we might be talking to fall in that line. Next one, please. Now this is from cultural cognition paper done by Dan Kahane and a guy named Brayman at the Yale Law School, 2005. Different kind of research from what Haidt was doing, but it shows that we can sort of draw ourselves or picture ourselves on this grid, whether we are hierarchist or egalitarian. Hierarchist means we're more of an authoritarian kind of view, more comfortable in that kind of structure. Egalitarian, we all want to be treated equally, where in the hierarchist, we are comfortable with and understand why there are different classes of people and different levels of responsibility and power. Individualist versus communitarian. Individualist is someone who's, think of the frontiersman as we were rolling across the country in the West back in the 1800s. Independent, self-sufficient, I'll take care of myself. I don't need to worry about others. Where communitarian is more, we have a powerful society, supportive society, and we should use that to support all of the individuals. And we have a responsibility to that society, more so than perhaps to taking care of ourselves first. I want to read just a couple of things from his research that commitments, much like hate, cultural commitments are prior to factual beliefs on highly charged political issues. It's prior to facts, moreover, not just in the evaluative sense that citizens might care more about how gun control, the death penalty, environmental regulation, and the like cohere with their cultural values than they care about the consequences of those policies. So based on a variety of overlapping psychological mechanisms, individuals accept or reject empirical claims about the consequences of controversial policies based on their vision of a good society. Research shows that where individuals feel self-affirmed, they are more open to reconsidering their beliefs on contested issues. And here's what's interesting, and maybe some of you are familiar with this, but research using neural imaging shows that when we read an article we believe to be written by a member of our own tribe, we process it with one part of our brain, generally adding to our store of knowledge without much evaluation, while we use a completely different part of the brain when we read an article from the other tribe. This is one of the cases proving again that messenger is more important than message. So what do we do with this? Open with the 3 tenets, critical. I believe it's been my personal experience since I was introduced to them that if I can stay with them each moment, I'm more free, I'm more effective, I'm more of service to others. And we can use, and this is the real point of this talk, we can use the discomfort that politics create to remind us to keep coming back to the 3 tenets, to use the other in politics that shows up so negatively in our mind to help us counter that by studying our own self and realizing that they and we are the same, that I and you are the same, to bear witness every moment. And I'm reminded as I get ready to wrap up and look forward very much to a discussion that we want to bear witness every moment. And I went up to the Native American Bearing Witness retreat this summer, and I love the drive from Denver up to the Black Hills. And once you get north of Cheyenne, if you're familiar with the West, the ground changes. It's just this rolling prairie, no longer with 8 or 6 foot high prairie grass, but it's just rolls and rolls and wide open, no hardly any buildings, little traffic flying along. And as I was driving through this country, I really felt in my body how different it would be to grow up there from growing up in the middle of Philadelphia or New York or Los Angeles or Chicago or a suburb outside of one of those cities. It's so different. And we should not be described that the people that live there may have they have their own idea about how things should roll. And that sense of cultural separation that is just another opinion gives us a chance, when we recognize it, to identify the opportunity to be more open. I want to close with it just happens to be a brief summary of an article that a guy named Paul Lederach wrote in the Washington Post on August 15 about how do we come together in politics. 3 easy points. First, we need to reach beyond our isolated bubbles. I think we all know that if many of us will stay within our own sphere of input about who's right and who's wrong, and it reinforces very, very strongly who's right and who's wrong. So first, we need to reach beyond our isolated bubbles. Second, I think this one's critical. We have to rehumanize our adversaries. Those bubbles that we're lost in have done a very good job of dehumanizing the other. They're all like this. They're all bad because of that. They all want to do these bad things. They're humans. They've got moms and dads and kids and brothers and sisters and concerns, and that we have to make sure we remember that they are also humans, and they are also, in a sense, us. So we have to have the courage to confront dehumanizing language and behavior, especially when it comes from within our closest circles. Because it's easier for us to go, well, I shouldn't think that way, and I'm going to meditate on that and try to loosen up my opinions about this. But to sit in silence when others in your isolated bubbles are dehumanizing the other tribe, it's important for you to find a mindful way to explore that with them, to see whether we can't rehumanize the other always. And his third point I like too. Finally, he says, we need to stick with it. So we need to keep doing it. We need to keep coming back to it every moment. As I said, the best thing about the 3 tenets is you can come back to them every moment. And when you do, well, certainly in my case, I find more freedom and more peace. So I'll close with that, and I'm looking forward to any input, any disagreements, any other opinions, any concerns, please. I'll give it back to you, Jeff, I guess, to be the monitor, or is that Chloe?
Sorry, Grant, I just stepped away for a second.
Oh, okay.
You want to open for questions?
Yep.
So let's see. I should be able to see most everybody here. So you can either use your electronic hand, which is down under React, like that, or just wave your regular hand if you've got a comment or a question. We're all friends here, so relax and let's engage here a little bit. And somebody surely has something. Francisco, thank you, sir.
Hey, hi everybody. So thank you, Grant. It was enlightening. I do politics myself here in Argentina. And my question is, because I was resonating with your arguments, here in Argentina, we had elections last year, and they were, in a way, pretty similar to the situation you are now confronting in the USA with your own elections. And obviously, the political party that won the election is, in my opinion, again, it's a cruel party, like a party with cruelty, like embedded, in their ideas. But I reckon that the problem with that, or mostly like the cause of that, is that they drain anger from people. They took people's anger, and then they build upon that. And the thing that we were saying from the other side of the election was that in a way we were angry as well, like from the liberal side of the opposition. We were angry ourselves, but we weren't analyzing that anger in the same way as they did. And I was thinking when you were presenting, we shared that emotion, right? In Argentina, like overall, in general, we were all angry with the economic situation, with the political situation, but 50% of people reacted in a way from that anger, and the other 50% we reacted differently. In my opinion, again, from my tribe, as you said, it was a more constructive way. Sorry, but from my opinion as well, the other side of the political spectrum reacted in a cruel way, in a cruel manner, with cruel politics. And yeah, that's just like a reflection I was making while you were presenting.
Yes, I think you were right in resonating with the U.S. election. I think Jeff mentioned it earlier that we have some people from the U.S. and some who are not. Currently it's a very hot topic in the U.S. and of course, I mean, do we call politics the issue in Sudan? Is it politics in Gaza? Is it politics in Ukraine? Politics have been a problem for us forever, certainly since the founding of our country. But you look across the history of the world, it's always been there. I think the thing that I would add to your anger reference between both sides, or that both sides share that anger, they both share fear. And certainly that's the case in the States. I can't speak to that in Argentina, but it's typically the case that those populist figures that wind people up, that really feed on that fear and anger, are using the fear to wind up the anger. And I just refer back to the moral foundations point that I showed up there, that there's a real fear in the US on the right side of what is happening to our culture, what is happening to, the values that they believe should be consistent across all of the country. And their leaders find it easy to identify things that are quite crazy that come out of the left. Likewise, the same is true in the left. There's in the left's mind, very legitimate foundational reasons for fear about what can happen if the right gets in. And the more the two sides wind each other up with this fear and anger, the more the defensive mechanisms of each tribe build up against that. So it's a vicious cycle. And our country has gone through this over the years, since our founding and before. That it's excuse me a second, I gotta close this door. I'm not the only one in the house. I love being a student of history. I can get teary-eyed thinking about how all these times we have built up this great fear, and therefore the anger that needs to defend against what's going to happen. And that anger can blind us. And then we get into the emotions generate that rational mind to create the reasons why we are certainly very right about having the opinion we have, and they're so wrong. And let me show you why. Blind to our own issues, whichever tribe we're in. And it's just that we can't change the world by ourselves, but we can change ourselves. We can be the internal peace, as the Dalai Lama says. If you want world peace, create your own inner peace. So I think that's what I would say is it's an issue. And that's why I love this topic, because so many people, and I know in my family and my wife's family, people are divided, and it's so hard to just sit down. Okay, let me listen, right? I'm going to start off with listening. And isn't listening one of the best ways to bear witness? If you truly listen, that's so to understand where they're coming from. Now But, you know, it's kind of hard to do that when you have people in your own bubble. If you're on the left, they're going to have guns. They're going to come and shoot us and kill us. Yeah. Okay. Now take a breath. What do you do with that? I mean, is that really going to happen? And how much do you want to live by fear? I mean, I don't have an answer. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about the three tenets. I'd also say it's a beautiful thing about Zen peacemakers. We don't come out with statements telling people what they ought to be doing. That statement in 2016 was only to remind people to use the three tenets to find your own path that's going to generate your own sense of peace and therefore help echo that peace around you. Maybe more than you wanted, Francisco.
Thanks, Francisco. Much appreciated. Someone else. Any of you Americans feeling anxiety or trepidation or uncertainty? Let's see, we have a couple of hands. Dale, thank you for rescuing me.
Hi, Grant.
Hello.
I appreciate your clarity and your level-headedness. And I'm curious, make a short story. So let's say you have a discussion using the three tenets and people really listen to each other. Question number one, do they get in touch with the foundations of their perspectives, namely their fear? And if so, what do they do with it? Do the three tenets address that? And ultimately, what happens? What's the result?
I'm going to segue off just a quick second because I'm reminded, because your question to me implies, it may not, but I was reminded of that much of the time when I try to have these conversations with people getting ready to lobby in an office, they had a version of that. Well, I know what I want when I'm finished. I mean, I want them to support our policy. And I go, no. You go in there thinking you're going to go in to listen, but you're only listening to find something that you can use to nail your point. You've already lost the battle. Truly, you need to listen with an open heart, like counsel, right? Listen with an open heart. Where are they coming from? What are their issues? What are their moral foundations? You may not agree. And in the end, you may find that you don't really have very much to agree on at all, except agreeing on the fact that you're both human and you both care about the well-being of others. It's just you have different ideas about how that should be manifested, how those policies should be created and how they should be executed. God, that's a powerful term, isn't it? Executed. So the beautiful thing about the three tenets is there's nothing to expect. There's no outcome that you should be anticipating because you can't anticipate an outcome if you truly approach it with a not knowing mind. So this doesn't mean that there isn't evil as we may define it in the world. This doesn't mean that Hitler didn't happen, that Hitler didn't murder millions of people, and that there haven't been horrible things. Aren't there horrible things going on now? But you know, but this is what we have. And if we find someone who has a different opinion about something and we think has deadly consequences for others, it's not easy to sit there and listen to them, but the alternative, to yell at them, isn't going to accomplish more at all.
So I'm a big fan of, I call it just listening. And I use that with couples a lot. And it takes them deep inside themselves. I'm wondering if getting two groups of people, reds and blues, as people call them, together to use the three tenets, do they go deep? Do they get to a place, of loving and respecting the other person, even if they don't agree with them. I'm looking for something that works.
It does. It does work.
Okay.
Uh, Zen Peacemakers has never done that. That would be that's a big, tall order because you have to identify the reds and blues, and you have to find a place for them to sit. You can't do this on Zoom. I can't imagine. But I remember a couple of years ago, somebody, New York Times, Washington Post, somebody pulled together 30 of each tribe and put them together in 5 different cities and sat them down. And at the end of there were very few minds changed, but almost all hearts were opened.
Amen.
And I just got back late last night from attending my uncle's funeral in West Virginia. And my uncle is only 5 years older than I am, but he was West Virginia's first astronaut, and he ran for governor. And it was interesting, he ran for governor back in 1986, and his opponent was Joe Manchin. And he and Joe were best buds, became best buds. And Joe told the story when I was talking to him yesterday. He said it was amazing because they were up in Morgantown, I think, having a debate. But both of them, before they ran for governor, weren't really sure which party. I mean, they weren't really party people. They were West Virginians, and they didn't disagree, or they agreed on most everything. And he said, we had the debate, we put on a show. Joe ended up winning, and then he went on to become a senator. But my point is that there's most of our country, and talking to one of his staff members yesterday, the number he used was 51% of the country are independents. And nobody's talking to them. It's the wingnuts, as John McCain called them, on either side. They're creating all of this tension, and they're so powerful that they're sucked. I mean, Joe Biden got sucked to the left. Trump is like taking over the Republican Party. It's a shame that we haven't found that, but this is where we can be those people that can help expand the voice of folks who want moderation and want independent thinking and open-hearted policies. They have to be sustainable. I mean, there's all kinds of things one needs to consider, but to just sit back and do nothing, it doesn't help. So I would encourage people to be engaged citizens and let your congresspeople know what you think in a constructive way.
Thanks, Dale. Thanks, Grant. Jacqueline, my friend Jacqueline, you got your hand up.
Yes. Hi.
All right, then.
One thing, I'd unmute myself. Okay, there. One thing that, about that is Better Angels works in that way. They bring together the disparate views and have a lot of respect for both sides, and they do conferences and everything. So I think they're doing a great job with that.
I agree. Good plug. I agree.
Yeah.
I mentioned them earlier, so thank you.
Yeah. So when you're dealing with a sociopath, they don't have that thing that you're looking for, where you can meet in common ground of really truly caring about, the people around them. So there isn't that factor. And I'm wondering if you could say anything about working with somebody who is that far off that far on the narcissistic spectrum that it's not listening isn't going to reach. Is there anything you have to say about that, or is there anything about that?
Well, narcissistic sociopath, I can't imagine who you're talking about. But I think so that type of person exists, but that type of person is in a very small minority. That doesn't mean that type of person can't wind people up and feed off their anger and their fear and their love of the idiotic things that can be said. right? So I wouldn't encourage someone who's true. I mean, and I'm not a judge of who a sociopath is and who's a narcissist is. I mean, I have my opinions about some folks in my life I've come across like that, and it's tedious listening to them. You don't have to. I mean, it doesn't mean that when you're using the three tenets and you approach with a not knowing mind, now you may already know that person sitting in the chair there, what they've been like in the past, and you're like rolling your eyes like, oh my God, but try to approach that moment with, okay, let me just forget that and be open-hearted to listening to what's going on now. If it's the same stuff and it's not going anywhere and it's painful to listen to, it's okay to find a way to terminate the conversation. I mean, it's not a conversation. Terminate your responsibility to just sit there and be a listener. That type of person, my experience, even if you ask Socratic questions and try to guide the, be more inquisitive about things, you get more not platitudes, you get more whatever those, just like stuff. And so that's not the person I would encourage you to spend a lot of time listening to. But the person that person is motivating and building up the fear and building up the anger, that's the person that you can listen to. That's the person that you have a chance of finding the connection with. And again, I don't want to encourage us to think about that's the person whose mind we need to change. That's the person whose heart we need to connect. We may not agree, may never agree, but at least on anything other than the fact that we're both humans and we both have our own fears and such, and we can respect those and we can have more understanding. When I sit down with someone who has different moral opinions about the relative value of this versus that, and I could take a deep breath and I go, okay, well, like now I understand why you have the views you have about a policy or whatever. I don't agree, but now that I understand your views, maybe there's a way that we can find in that Venn diagram an overlap where your view, your concerns, your fears, and my fears can be avoided, minimized, while we find those things that we're hoping to accomplish together in a way that gets us forward, that quote, common ground. But you'll never find it if you don't listen. And the thing that's so sad about what the Facebook and all that stuff, what do you call that? Social media. That social media just encloses these bubbles. I mean, that's how they feed themselves. They get you all wound up. You keep reading these things. I've got family members that go down these rabbit holes, and I'm like, and do you feel better after having spent 3 hours doing that? After doing it yesterday too? I mean, have you learned anything new? Yeah, but this and that. I'm going, yeah, but is that really new? Do you feel better? I mean, maybe they do, but it doesn't seem like it. So if someone's a murderer and has a gun and they're pointing it to your head, I mean, you want to listen to whether or not they want your wallet or something, but I mean, you're not going to be trying to find out how you can get in touch with their heart other than trying to, don't shoot me. I don't mean to, bit of a stretch to go from narcissist, but anyway.
Not so much of a stretch.
Perhaps. But then again, if that's the situation, what do we do with it?
In that same vein, how do you do lobbying and advocating without trafficking in views?
Oh, I'm reminded of that great expression that there's a big difference between judgment and discernment. When I'm lobbying, I have an idea of what I'm hoping to advocate. I'm hoping to create national policies that will address the cause of global warming. I prefer to call it global warming because that's what I think it is. I mean, climate change is preferred by others, but I have an idea of what it is I'm hoping to accomplish, but and you need members to get that done. You need leadership to bring it to the floor, and you need a team to help you do it. You need to build relationships. It takes a long time. So you have opinions about what you want to get done. But you have a life you need to work with. You have a life that includes all of these people. And the only way you're going to connect with them is to truly connect with them. And I like to connect with the heart. I mean, I don't say that when I go in the office, but that's how you make change. And you may find when you speak to them that, okay, well, that policy that I was really advocating, I can see that's a problem for the constituents for a number of these states. And if that's a problem for the constituents and we don't find a way to work with that, it's not going to pass. Mm-hmm. So we either drop that policy or change it or find something else. Rather than doing what so many people do when lobbying, going in and just pounding on the table, you've got to do this. It's the most important thing in the world. And they don't listen to, if you're a constituent, they'll take the meeting and they don't really roll their eyes, but they might be, figuratively rolling their eyes in their head, waiting for it to be over. And, nothing gets accomplished.
Thank
We
you.
got to build bridges. We got to build bridges.
Thanks, Jacqueline. I see a couple of hands, but Odin, you had yours up earlier. Do you want to jump back in the queue? You want to go next, or did you?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Grant.
How you doing?
Let's talk. Jacqueline really kind of addressed some of what I was concerned with, which is lobbying. And it seems like in politics, there's maybe not, there's a small number of people who are sociopaths or narcissists or, impossible to get through to. But it seems like there would be quite a few people that are kind of in bad faith, acting in bad faith. They have their marching orders. And they're going to push for those things and manipulate the system. And how would you deal with people coming from such a position where this is their job, this is what they have to do? I mean, is it possible to even have those conversations? They seem like the title would be that they're acting in bad faith.
I like the question. It seems that way, but what I will tell you, more so on the right side of the aisle than the left side of the aisle. But there are a large number of moderates that I think we could all agree have moderate views when you're sitting down and talking to them across the kitchen table or behind closed doors in their office. But they are physically intimidated by being primaried or attacked when they're with their family at a Shoney's having a Sunday brunch by someone who comes up screaming at them, how could you dare vote against that or vote for that or say what you did? I talked to a congressman who was thankful that he lost his election before, so he would, a Republican, so he wasn't there on the floor because he would have voted to impeach. And he knew in his district that if he had voted what he believed was the right vote, voted to investigate whether or not there should be an impeachment, right? To support the investigation. That he could have been, he would have been accosted with his two little girls and his wife wherever he went. And I ain't right. But this is it happens less so on the left, but it does happen on the left. The heat around Gaza has caused a lot of challenges. So I will tell you my experience and behind closed doors that the folks that almost all of the public rhetoric that we hear doesn't exist behind closed doors. That's how, I mean, if you are just a simple congressperson, a member of Congress, the leadership decides where your office is. The leadership decides what committees you're on. The leadership decides what your position on those committees are. The leadership basically decides what kind of power and opportunity you might have to be effectual for your constituents, for the country, for your career. They don't want you saying something, or they want you to say this, or they don't want you to say that. You can listen to your conscience, and it's like little slices. Because if you don't get reelected, you can't do anything. I mean, this is the big dilemma. If you don't get reelected, you can't do anything. And so you have to walk that path. And meanwhile, you got to spend, and the last I remember reading, it's like 45% of your time as a congressman, member of Congress, raising money. Meanwhile, all these bills we're talking about that we want them to pass or we don't want them to pass, and they're trying to investigate, these things are massive. Massive. And to try to understand what it is that they really say, who do you listen to? Well, you got lobbyists who are telling you that this bill's good and tell you why. And in many cases, the lobbyists write the bills. Yeah. The system is very challenging, it's very complex, and you can get all upset about it, but that's what we have. And I'd say, as much challenging as it is, I prefer our system to any other governmental system, but it's ugly sometimes. God, it's ugly. But most of the people are there. So everyone I've met in Congress, whether staff, whether 22-year-old staff or 45-year-old staff or members of Congress, there's an array of reasons why they're there. Ego and pride and power, but serving their country and advancing their career and making a difference. But they have to operate within the party system. That's another curse. I mean, George Washington was very strongly opposed to allowing parties to exist. He didn't want any parties. We don't want parties. Well, we're human. We're going to make tribes. So Jefferson and Hamilton got them going.
Yeah. Is there an avenue for speaking and opening dialogue to organizations like, I think it's named ERIC, as far as the ones who actually are writing bills and creating policies?
There are so many, it's hard to say. I mean, I think you need, if there are, like for me, climate change is what calls me. So you dig into what calls you. It may be immigration that calls you. It could be abortion that calls you. It could be, Gaza, whatever it is. There's many, many different ones on pros and cons on any side of any issue. Some extraordinarily well funded and some are just grassroots, barely getting by. Unfortunately, there's a growing number, not small, but growing number of folks who are working specifically in the middle. There's a PAC I work with that's called Bipartisan Climate Action PAC that is supporting the re-election and engagement of moderates on both sides of the aisle, equally balanced, who are climate advocates. We don't advocate a specific policy. We just want them to get together. So one of the things we do is create little social gatherings for the staffs of other opposite sides of the aisle on a specific issue with drinks and food. I mean, these kids don't get paid much. They're always looking for free food and drinks at 5 o'clock. So bring them together, R's and D's, sandwiches, beer, pizza, whatever, and talk about the grid, talk about nuclear, talk about solar panels, whatever, electric cars. But it's a way for them to get to know each other and to rehumanize each other.
Well, thank you, Grant.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Odin. Ann, I want to come to you, but I did see that Dale had his hand up earlier. Dale, you still want to be in the queue?
I do, but I didn't want to hog the show. So let Ann go first.
Okay, Ann, go ahead, Ann. Thank you. Thanks for that, Dale.
Okay, Dale, I think we got plenty of time, so let me lower my hand. I'm thinking on a kind of a personal level, and it's been percolating while you were speaking, Grant, and others, and I appreciate the talk about fear and how much that drives us both personally and politically. And one of the things you also said, for me on a personal level, is you got to keep at it. It is really easy not to engage. When you, for example, I live in a community that's pretty diverse politically, both my small community and my town. And so that puts the onus on me to make sure that I'm aware of not the fear of engagement and using my skillful means when I do engage. It also drives, I think it drives some folks who are, especially, as you say, tribal. And I often use the phrase, tell me more, when somebody says something, and sometimes that helps, and sometimes it doesn't, because if the person is not really thinking too carefully about their ideas or their opinions or what they heard on the news or social media, it can push that fear up even more. But sticking to it and trying to be gentle and caring with someone and letting them know that, you know, we're all humans is important. But I just see the fear as such a big factor. So I appreciate that the conversation, there was a lot of conversation on that. So thank you.
Yeah, it's I think fear drives us, and of course we've read over the years how politicians use that to whip the tribe together. I found myself thinking, as you said, tell me more, to counsel. Yes, that's a great request, but it's very important about how your tone of voice presents it, because it can show up in a patronizing, judging kind of way if it's not careful. So global warming, I mentioned, is one of the things that I'm working on and lobbying with Congress, but my other heart calling is racism. And your tell me more reminds me of a vow I made a number of years ago, that as a white guy, privileged white guy, I can ask the question of another white person, how's this racism thing showing up for you? And see where it goes. Brother-in-law, a number of years ago, when I asked him the question, said, I'm so sick and tired of it. I mean, white guys are more downtrodden than anyone else now because of all the privilege everybody else is getting. And I was like, really? Wow. Have you ever thought about what it'd be like to wake up black tomorrow? Well, that's not fair. So I just left it there. I mean, it's like, and and I've had conversations like that with friends about climate. Initially very, no, and you know, but over just listening, talking patiently, but truly listening. And again, not listening with the agenda of listening to find the hook or the weapon that you can use to turn their mind, but truly listening to understand, to connect, and then see what happens. Again, the 3 tenets.
Thank you, Ed. Adele, you got your hand back. Go ahead.
You're muted.
You're muted, Dale.
Okay, so I have a confession to make. I'm not attached to the identity, but I'm a left-wing nut. And I've always wondered how an intelligent, open-hearted person could be a conservative. Seems that you are identified.
I said fiscal conservative.
Okay.
I'm a lifelong independent at the same time.
All right.
I'm Scotch-Irish, okay?
I don't know if we have time for me to share something kind of irrelevant, but in any case, I'll leave that till the end. I really do want to understand. I really do want to understand how a loving, open-minded, open-hearted, intelligent person can take a right-wing perspective on issues in general. I would love to see a discussion between someone on the right and someone on the left, both of whom are intelligent and informed, open-minded, open-hearted. I'd love to hear a discussion. Where would I find that?
Your neighbor, family member?
Well, I don't consider myself really informed.
Oh,
So I'm
Oh.
looking for people
Oh.
who,
oh, you're looking, okay, presentation. Okay, well, I'm going to step back and go to your first question. I imagine most people on this call are familiar with Joan Halifax.
sure,
And I've known her a long time, and I'm a big fan. She's a big power, and she does many wonderful things. And I was out with her in 2013, 2014 or something, there with Bernie. I was his bagman. I love being Bernie's bagman. And I told her my recent new dedication to working with Congress on climate. She said, "Oh, you need to meet Chris Ford, who had just finished chaplaincy training, a lifelong Republican, who was the senior staff member for the Republican Banking Committee in the Senate. You would love Chris." Chris, I mean, I'm an independent. I mean, I think he was not a Trump fan. I remember having lunch with him the week after Trump won in 2016. And I remember him telling me, I didn't bring it up, but he told me he loved what Zen Peacemakers put out. For him, when so many other groups, Buddhists for sure, but I didn't spend time with others, but so many other groups were going, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world," and everything else. Bernie just was reminding us it's the three tenets. And I think, Dale, you need to be careful when you go right and left. You know, we all have, it's on what issue? So, immigration. I don't think there's anybody that believes we should allow nobody in. Really. I don't think there's anybody that believes we should let everybody in. Maybe a few. And I guess, I mean, but they're a limited number of both ends of those. There's plenty of room in the middle to figure it out. We got all kinds of contrasting considerations. And I was born into an Eisenhower Republican household, but I never called myself a Republican. But I'm a fiscal conservative, and I like to think of things not just sustainable in the green sense of nature, but in the green sense of money. We can't just mindlessly spend money. And whether it's reducing taxes or whatever. I mean, it's just I think the Blue Angels, the Better Angels is a good group to look into. There may be some meetings in your town. They are very encouraging these kinds of conversations about different issues. They do have a challenge of getting enough Reds in the room, but they do. And so there's things like that out there.
so
But I think you don't, when I think of a left-wing nut, I think of a left-wing nut who wants to take, I mean, I know anarchist friends, that capitalism's horrible. We need to destroy the system. And I'm like, okay, and what takes its place? And by the way, who suffers when it's destroyed? Do you think the rich people are going to suffer when it's destroyed? You know, so.
by the way, I know about Better Angels. I have joined them. But I'm not looking for people like me on the right and on the left having discussions. I'm looking for people who are very informed. I want to know, I want to hear both sides from intelligent, informed people.
I think that one of the tricks is we are so tribal now and we're so polarized now that when you are an advocate and you have good opinions, well-founded opinions, well-informed opinions about an issue, it's only one issue in a panoply of issues that your party cares about. And you need your party to help get your issue advanced. So you need to be seen as a full member of your party. But when you sit down with each individual, you shouldn't be surprised. They're not all the same. They're not going to have the same views, and they can disagree within the party about different things, and you can see that. So, yeah, just everybody you see is another human, and what are their views, and how can you connect?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dale. Really good question. Really good question. It makes me think too. And there may be video, and this won't help you at all, Dale, because I think this was probably much more for entertainment value. But 45 years ago, G. Gordon Liddy and Timothy Leary were out on the road doing point counterpoint kind of stage presentations. But I think it was probably much more of a clown show than anything substantive. Francisco, please go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. Now, just to add up on what Dale was asking about, at least from Latin America, I could say that many people from the left in the past 4 or 5 years so have turned to the right, and I'm talking about political figures, not out of identity politics, so-called, but out of frustration with the delivering of public policies, which could contribute with material conditions for people to live with dignity. And that's something that we are facing right now. Out of frustration, many political figures are reconsidering the left because we only achieved, for instance, my own party that governed the country in the last 4 years, we've only achieved just, let's say, symbolic achievements, but not so much material conditions for people to live with more dignity and benefits. So I think that many figures that are like reconsidering such positions in the left, on the left, are doing so not so much by identity politics, but this frustration they have with their party.
A good point. And I'm reminded what I think each of you know, that people get up every morning and think about getting their kids to work, or get the kids to school, to feed them breakfast, to get themselves to work, to shop for dinner that evening, to make sure the house is maintained if they have a house. They've got to live. They got to find a way to pay for the braces for their teenager. It's the sort of kitchen table problems that the politicians talk about. Therefore, so few people, particularly those who are disadvantaged, particularly those who are overwhelmed by life's daily challenges, have any time to spend trying to figure out what's best. Not much, the policies themselves, the issues themselves, much less the solutions, possible solutions to these issues. And so, as I mentioned before, and I think we all know, we all take comfort in belonging to something. We all take comfort to having social circles. We have family, but we also like to hang out with people who have similar views, who, we can just sort of chill with and have a beer, have a tea, and not worry about saying the right thing or not saying the right thing. And when you don't have time to really investigate things, and one member of that little group has some strong views, listening, that's part of the conversation. And you go, oh, real, okay, that's how it is. All right, well, unless you hear something else, unless you step outside your bubble, you're not going to hear anything else. That sort of becomes how you feel. And if someone attacks how you feel based on no facts at all, they're either attacking your friend or your tribe, and you're like, well, hold on a second. And there it goes, bunch of ignorance. But people don't have, we can't fault folks for not taking the time, because how much time have you each spent on trying to figure out the solutions to any of these issues? And meanwhile, you don't have to spend 40% of your day trying to raise money and manage the political intrigues and the staff problems and everything else. I mean, it's now that doesn't say it's impossible. It just reminds us that there's challenges everywhere. It's not just, we're not the center of the universe. But frustration, you're right, is a driver. And I think that's why you'll see, and we read about this in many countries' elections, certainly over my years of history, that the party that was in charge, but the people were frustrated, things weren't going the way they wanted, may have had nothing to do with the party. It may have been global economic conditions or whatever. They get voted out. And some other party comes in that we all might agree or not, looks like a crazy idea. And it turns out that it was a mess. And now they're worse off than they were before. Or sometimes it works out. Sometimes people who seem horrible, when they step in the seat, show up in a better way. Sadly, that hasn't been the case all the time, but it does happen. So we don't know. We don't know. And we all live with the politic, and that's one of the reasons our founding fathers created the sort of three structures of our government, with the Senate and the House and the executive separate and with different ways of existing and being, and hopefully to create a balance. If the majority rules, they can be pretty ugly sometimes. So you have to have a balance there. But you don't want the minority to rule either. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but that's why I love this topic. There's so many issues, so many edges, to keep reminding yourself that you're not the center of the universe, and we don't know, but it seems like we do.
Thanks, Francisco. And Marita, I'm going to call on you in just a second, but before we lose anybody here, I want to point out, I put a flyer into the chat, and certainly for those in the U.S., but really I think anyone outside of the U.S. who's interested in the U.S. election. It occurred to me, everybody I know has some level of anxiety about the next 70 days to a greater or lesser extent. And as Zen practitioners, what do we do? What do we do when we are faced with strong emotion? We open our heart and we let that emotion be there, and we hold it with an open hand until it's ready to go. So we decided to offer meditation on the evening of November 5th, starting at 6 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I'll do 3 periods of 30 minutes with a 10-minute break in between, and I'll do a short chant at the end, with no particular goal or outcome desired, other than let's just come together and be still in the face of this uncertainty and perhaps fear and confusion and the unknown of election night in the U.S. So free to join, open to everybody. Join us if you will. Thank you. Marita, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Grant. I really appreciate this conversation. Jeff, what you just added was part of my question. Is what hasn't been brought up right now is a sense of what haven't been brought up is a sense of urgency that we're in right now. And I'm just wondering, other than meditating, what you might have for a 3-tenet approach in such a time of urgency, where we've got a few more, less than 80 days left before, I'm assuming that that if climate change is so important to you, then a win by the Republican leader would not be effective for climate change. It could be disastrous. For me, I'm thinking, life and death. I'm thinking my grandchildren, my children, my grandchildren's grandchildren. And so my question is, what about adding urgency to the 3 tenets? And I guess that would be the third tenet of activism, based on the first 2 tenets. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the question. And I'm finding myself suggesting you drop urgency. If you truly approach each moment with the 3 tenets, with a not knowing mind, and you can be open to seeing perhaps that it is what it is. What is it I can do that arises out of that? In a strange sort of way, coming to the last bit of your question, if there is a red sweep, the House, the Senate, and the White House, it's then possible. I mean, based on conversations I've had with the moderate Republicans, it's then possible that climate solutions that are consistent with fiscal conservative principles, and there are some, could be advanced. And what would be interesting is to see whether or not Democrats would support those proposals. I don't know. It's so complicated and so messy and so human. One of the I remember litmus tests when left members would go, lefty lobby, fellow volunteer lobbyists who were of a left worldview would go into Republican offices all eager-eyed, and how we have to, climate change is it's the end of the world. We got to do this, we got to do that. And they'd get stopped dead in their tracks when the staff member, because we'd usually meet with staff. So how do you feel about nuclear? Oh, nuclear is horrible. We can't have nuclear. Oh, then so what's more important? Would be a question. I guess all I'm really saying is that the 3 tenets, I think, and I appreciate this test, Marita, I appreciate this test, because for me, I have yet to find a time when, if I really apply the 3 tenets, if I really truly approach with a not knowing mind, because that's a tricky thing. If you approach with it's urgent, then you have already violated the first tenet, and truly bear witness to what's showing up. And again, it's not supposed to be in this literal order, but it's an iterative experience. But what shows up for you that you are called to do? What are your skill sets? What resources do you have? What can you do? What's your heart call you to do? Well, if you're called to do something, then do it. If you're called to be activist, if you're called to do something dramatic, do it. And then bear witness to the results of that. Did it help? Did it not help? And just keep going. I started out with my climate work very much consistent with the implications in your voice. The world's on fire. My hair's on fire. We got to take care of this now. And I was angry that no one was doing anything. I was angry. I mean, how can you not do anything? Don't you see? And this was back in 2012, 2013. I was late. But I was angry, very angry. But it wasn't accomplishing anything. And only when I started to slow down and recognize that, well, I might think that this office and that office, if these guys just got together, guys and gals got together, we could do something now. And if we just started being nice to each other, because fight over the other stuff, but this is grandchildren stuff, right? It wasn't going anywhere. They'd listen maybe, or they'd act like they were listening. They weren't listening, but nothing changed. Then I realized my hair on fire is not the way to do this. I mean, that may be And you've probably heard the expression, the recommended way to practice Zen, practice your meditation. So your hair is on fire. I've heard that. Not an advocate of it myself, basically, but I learned that this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And whoever wins this election, it's still a marathon. And whoever wins the election, no matter how you think they might screw up the country, we're still here. Things will be different, and we still need to keep going. And if we can keep going, looking to approach each moment with the three tenets, I keep wanting to say that, and remembering that our opinion that this is urgent, I agree with you, it's urgent. I agree with you, we should be doing something about it right now. And I could get myself angry about the fact we're not. But we aren't. So what do I do about it? And that's, I think, the trick. And I appreciate the question of, I forget what the emotions, emotions can be so strong and powerful. And we have to, they get in the way. They reinforce our opinions, for sure. And they get in the way of us sitting quietly and trying to be with the three tenets. But we need to recognize that those emotions are what they are. They pass, and embrace them with love and not let them take over to the degree possible. So easy to say, but when they're happening, it's not easy at all. Anyway, but please, give me a counterpoint. I'd love it.
I guess my counterpoint is, to me, this election is the most important election in the history of the United States. And that changes things, and steps that we take before November 5th are different than steps we will take after. And so how do we prioritize the steps that we take before November 5th? Because this is the only opportunity we have to do that.
Well, it's the only opportunity. This is the opportunity we have at the moment. And I would say, you're right. I share your concern. So what are we doing about it now? What are you doing to help ensure that the folks that you want to get elected are getting elected? Does that mean, are you willing to go out and knock on doors on behalf of the party you're supporting? Are you willing to donate what you're capable of donating to the elections of those that are running? Because the ads do make a difference. We are. I'm not letting this moment pass without doing something. This is not suggesting the three tenets allows you to do nothing. It's the opposite. What are you called to do? When I sit with this, I'm called to do different things, so I do them. And if you want to do it 20 minutes a day, or you want to do it 20 hours a day, now's the time to do it, if you're called to do it. So the three tenets isn't about not action. It's just about wise action, if there's action to be taken. Sometimes it's found when I sit, and I've heard with others, you sit with something, you pretty just start out thinking I'm going to be doing something, and in the end you come up like, oh, I don't know if that works. I guess I better sit with it some more. Sometimes you come up with an idea and you do it, and when you bear witness to the fruits of your action, you find out they really screwed things up. Well, that's not so good. Well, I guess I better sit with it again. What should I do now? Great edge politics. Again, one of the best ways to be with the self and other, and to study the self, and to recognize that, when Dogen talks about 1,000 dharmas, 10,000 dharmas, million dharmas. It's life is all of it, everything, all of it. All of it is Zen. All of it is us. All of it is the one.